There we go. Good evening. I hope that you can understand my English. We're short of time, so I think we're going to forego translation. I've spent 28 years fighting incineration from 1985. And that's taken me to 49 states in the United States, 7 provinces in Canada, and 60 other countries. And I've just published this book, The Zero Waste Solution. And I appear in this movie, and Jeremy Irons wrote the introduction to our movie. Now, between 1985 and 1995, Work on Waste helped to stop 300 incinerators in North America. And the only reason I mention that is that we learned something very important, and that is about affecting change. Affecting change is like driving a nail through a piece of wood. The experts can sharpen the nail, but they can't push the nail through the piece of wood with their bare hands. You need the hammer of public opinion to drive this nail home. So that's why you are so important. I hope to sharpen a few nails tonight, but in terms of ending fluoridation in Curacao, you have to do that. And it's as easy as turning off a tap if you have the political will. To get the political will, we need many more people educated on this issue. Educated and organized. Thank goodness you have very good organizers here on Curacao. Rudolph and Sonia and all the Amanda and Christian and Ryan. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I spent 17 years fighting water fluoridation. First as a professor of chemistry, specializing in environmental chemistry and toxicology, and now as the direction of the Flouride Action Network. And this research culminated in 2010 in the publication of this book, The Case Against Fluoride, and I have a few copies with me here tonight. It was written by 3 scientists, James Beck, an MD, PhD, physicist, and Spedding Micklem, a biologist, a doctorate from Oxford. And everything in that book is documented with the scientific literature, 80 pages of references. Now, my presentation this evening. First of all, I'll explain why fluoridation should not have started. Then, I shall give you 7 ugly facts that have emerged since 1990 that should have ended fluoridation worldwide. Then, I will talk about the better alternatives to fight tooth decay. But let me say it simply, we need education, not fluoridation, to fight tooth decay. I want to give you some good news about many communities that have stopped fluoridation around the world recently. And finally, I want to talk about the resources available to you for this fight. So, part 1, why fluoridation should never have started. We should never use the public water supply to deliver medicine. And fluoride is the only time that we've done that. Why? Why? The answer is because you can't control who gets the medicine. It goes to everybody, including sick people, elderly people, babies. It goes to everybody. And thirdly, you can't control the dose. You can't control the dose that people get because you can't control how much water they drink. And some people on this island will drink a lot of water. And then fourthly, it violates the individual's rights to informed consent to medicine. So what the government is doing in Curacao to everyone, an individual doctor here could do to no one. Your doctor could not force you to drink fluoridated water. And yet, the government is doing that to everybody. You're not alone. They do it to us in America. But they're wrong. There is no reason to swallow fluoride. It's not a nutrient. There's not a single process in our body that needs fluoride. Not one single process in our body needs fluoride. But we also know that fluoride is a very toxic substance and interferes with many processes in our body. In other words, it doesn't do you any good to swallow it, and it has the potential to cause harm. 7, nature has given us a very clear indication that the baby doesn't need fluoride for healthy development. The level of fluoride in mother's milk is extremely low, 0.004 parts per million. And that means that a bottle-fed baby in Curacao is getting 370 times more fluoride than nature intended. Now, who's right here? A bunch of dentists or nature in terms of what the baby needs? How many parents on this island know that they shouldn't bottle feed their baby with tap water? Not many, I suspect. 8, in addition to posing risks to the baby's developing tissues, because fluoride accumulates in our bones, it poses lifelong risks to adults, elderly people, in the form of arthritis, and also the possibility of making your bones more fragile, more brittle. So we have to worry about hip fractures if we live and drink this all our lives. The fluoridating chemicals that we use are not pharmaceutical grade. They're not the same grade that you get in toothpaste. These chemicals come from the phosphate fertilizer industry. They can't dump this stuff into the sea by international law. They can't dump it locally because it's too concentrated. But in the United States, if someone buys a hazardous waste, it then becomes a product. And then we can put it in the drinking water. It's absurd, absolutely absurd. And one of the contaminants in these fluoridated chemicals is arsenic. And arsenic is a known cancer-causing chemical. And in the United States, our position is there is no safe dose for a chemical that causes cancer. So you are increasing the risk of cancer to the people living on this island. Now, we can argue about how much we're increasing it or how little we're increasing it. But because this chemical is contaminated with arsenic, you are going to increase the risk of cancer. So now I get to part 2. The 6, it should be 7. The 7 ugly facts. Well, I might not get to 7, we'll see. 7 ugly facts. And this comes from a statement from Aldous Huxley, a famous writer. And he said, the tragedy of science is that a beautiful hypothesis can always be destroyed by an ugly fact. So here are the ugly facts that should have destroyed the hypothesis of putting fluoride in the water to benefit our teeth. The first ugly fact needs a little prelude. Between 1980 and 1990, there was a growing number of articles being published around the world in important journals stating there was little difference in tooth decay between communities that had been fluoridated and communities that hadn't been fluoridated. And then in 1990, there was published the result of the largest survey of tooth decay in the United States. And this was meant to put the matter to rest. They looked at the tooth decay in 39,000 children in 84 communities, some fluoridated, some not fluoridated. And what did they find? Well, they measured decayed, missing, and filled surfaces of the teeth. And let me explain here that you've got 4 surfaces in the top cutting teeth, the 6 cutting teeth, and the 6 bottom teeth, the cutting teeth, have 5 surfaces. 4 surfaces, because they don't count the cutting edge. But the rest of the teeth have 5 surfaces. So between 4 and 5 surfaces in a child's mouth. And by the time all the teeth have come out in a child's mouth, there's 128 surfaces. So now we're going to look at the difference in tooth decay between children who'd always lived all their lives in a fluoridated community. 2.8 decayed, missing, or filled surfaces. And children who'd always lived their lives in a non-fluoridated community, this is the average from 5 to 17 years, 3.4. So the saving in tooth decay was 0.6 of one tooth surface out of 128 tooth surfaces. And to make matters worse, the authors didn't even show that that 0.6 of a saving was statistically significant. And today we believe that it wasn't statistically significant. But this is the biggest survey ever done in the United States. Now I want you can't read that writing, so I'm taking it out, I'm reprinting. This is the abstract of the paper. You notice they don't mention 0.6 of a tooth surface. What they say is children who'd always been exposed to community water fluoridation had mean DMFS scores about 18%. So this 0.6 of a tooth surface is here described as 18%. They go on, the results suggest that water fluoridation has played a dominant role in the decline of caries, that's tooth decay, and must continue to be a major prevention methodology. So here we have this finding of a saving of 0.6 of one tooth surface out of 128 tooth surfaces. And this has been described as playing a dominant role in declining tooth decay in the United States. And it must continue. Now, beware of exaggeration. It is true that 0.6 divided by the total amount of tooth decay, 3.4, it is 18%. So it's mathematically accurate, but it's very misleading to the average person. And it gets worse than this. Look what they did in Queensland, Australia. This is when they were promoting mandatory fluoridation for the whole state of Queensland in Australia in 2007. The Queenslanders were told that this one town that was fluoridated in Queensland, Townsville, has 65% less tooth decay than non-fluoridated Brisbane. Well, let's look at the numbers. Oh, there's the advertisements. This is from your civil servants, your health agency. There's the statement. In Townsville, water supplies have been fluoridated since 64, resulting in 65% less tooth decay in children than in Brisbane. Okay? Let's look at the numbers. The DMFS for the Townsville was 0.09. The DMFS for Brisbane was 0.26. The saving of 65% was actually 0.17 of one tooth surface. This is 1/3 less than the United States. Now, if that full-page advertisement had said, if we fluoridate Queensland, we're going to reduce the tooth decay by 0.17 of a tooth surface, how many people would have been impressed with that? This is misleading. But it gets worse. According to Queensland Health, this is what teeth look like that are exposed to fluoridated water. This is what teeth look like without exposure to fluoridated water. I put to you that that is outright propaganda. That is absolutely disgusting. Do the teeth look like that in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, in France, in Germany, in Belgium, in Austria? No! This is ridiculous. And it would be one thing if this was an activist group. But no, these people are working for the taxpayers. We expect these people to give us objective information, not propaganda. And that is propaganda. So ugly fact number 2. A study done, and like the last one, it was financed by the US government, where they actually measured how much tooth decay was occurring in children as a function of how much fluoride the kids were swallowing. So for each child, they worked out how many milligrams of fluoride they were ingesting each day from the water, from the food, from toothpaste, etc. And this is what they state. These findings suggest that achieving a caries-free status may have relatively little to do with fluoride intake. They didn't find a relationship between how much fluoride the kids were swallowing and tooth decay. And this is a government-funded study, meticulously carried out. So this brings us to ugly fact number 3, which probably explains ugly fact numbers 1 and 2. And this fact was in 1999, the Center for Disease Control, which promotes fluoridation in the United States, conceded that the predominant benefit of fluoride is topical. It works on the outside of the teeth, not systemic, not from inside the body. In other words, you don't have to swallow fluoride to get the benefit. You can brush it on your teeth with fluoridated toothpaste and spit it out. And there's the exact quote. We don't have time to go through that. But by the way, if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, they can have it. I can send it to them by email. Okay, so don't worry about taking too many notes. But there's the full quote. So if fluoride works topically on the outside of the tooth and not from inside the body, why swallow fluoride and expose every tissue in the body to a toxic substance when you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out? And this way, you don't have to force it on people that don't want it. You don't have to violate their right to informed consent to medication. You don't have to violate the laws that the lawyer gave us at the beginning. You don't have to do this. This is something that we're doing to ourselves. And we can stop doing it to ourselves with a strong wrist. Just turn off the tap. Ugly fact number 4. The publication of this very important review by the National Research Council of the United States. This took 3 years for them to complete. When it came out, it was 500 pages, 1,100 references. I was the only anti-fluoridation scientist that testified before this council. And they listened to what I had to say. What they showed in their report is that fluoride can cause harm at relatively low levels. and that there are many, many unanswered safety questions about this practice. In chapter 2 of this report, there was an analysis of how much fluoride different groups in the population were getting. And they concluded that several subsets, including bottle-fed infants, are getting over the EPA's safe reference dose. And here is the figure, which I want you to look at. This figure is the different groups down the bottom, and I want to show you this figure here. This is non-breastfed babies. These are babies that are bottle-fed. The red line is the safe level, and the dot at the top is how much more bottle-fed babies are getting than the safe reference dose. That's important. Babies are getting too much fluoride when they're drinking water at 1 part per million, let alone 1.5 parts per million in Curacao. They showed that there are many unanswered questions and recommended more research be done. Very little research has been done since their report was published. And they showed several harmful effects in this report. I urge people that are interested in the science to read this document. Now, I argue that the levels which they show cause harm in India, China, and other parts of the world offer no adequate margin of safety to protect all our citizens drinking fluoridated water. And I'll give you an example in a moment with lowered IQs in children. So ugly fact number 5. The Center for Disease Control published the dental fluorosis figures, and these confirmed that American children are getting way too much fluoride. And I'll give you the context of this. When they started flouridation, they thought that about 10% of the children would get very mild dental fluorosis. Hardly noticeable, but only 10% of the children. And this was a trade-off. We would lower tooth decay, but a few children would get this very mild dental fluorosis, which was not of any concern. Okay? Well, run the clock forward to 2010, and they admit that 41% of all American children aged 12 to 15 had dental fluorosis. 41%. And here are the figures. 28.5% had very mild dental fluorosis. This is one age of the range. A very mild dental fluorosis goes from these white patches on the cusp of the teeth, and at the far end of the range, up to 25% of the tooth is impacted. 28.5% of American kids have that. And then 8.6% of kids have mild dental fluorosis. Up to 50% of the enamel is impacted. And 3.6%, nearly 4 in 100, 3.6% have moderate or severe dental fluorosis, where all 100% of the enamel is impacted. Now, the question that was never answered in the United States or any other country that fluoridates was, what else is happening to the baby's developing tissues? This we can see. We can see the dental fluorosis, and that's all they admit to. But what about what we can't see? What's it doing to the baby's bones? What's it doing to the baby's thyroid gland? What's it doing to the baby's brain? And we can't see any of those without careful study. And sadly, because of politics. They are not doing those careful studies in Curacao, in the United States, in Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. So ugly fact number 6. Now this information is not coming from fluoridated countries. This is coming from non-fluoridated countries that want to get the fluoride out of their water. They have too much naturally occurring fluoride in areas in India and China, parts of Africa, Mexico, Iran, and they are interested in finding out what level they need to get down to protect their population, because it's going to take money to remove the fluoride. So they are doing the careful studies. And what have they found? There is extensive evidence that fluoride damages the brains of animals and humans. And I mean extensive damage. Over 40 animal studies show that prolonged exposure to fluoride can damage the brain. There's 9 animal studies which report that mice or rats ingesting fluoride have an impaired capacity to learn and remember. 12 studies, 7 human, 5 animal, link fluoride with neurobehavioral deficits. 3 human studies shows that fluoride damages the fetal brain. And 37 out of 43 published studies shows that fluoride lowers IQ. And I want to tell you how you can get all these studies. If you go to our webpage, fluoridealert.org, and you press the button on the top right-hand corner called Researchers, and click on Issues, and then Health Database, and then click on Brain Effects, you'll get a list of all those studies. And if you want to go there directly, fluoridealert.org/issues/health/brain. And we've got, if you put other tissues in there like kidney, bone, teeth, you'll get all the data on that. My son has done a brilliant job putting this website together. Now, the IQ study that I want to share with you is of particular interest to me because I have been to China and visited the 2 villages where the study was done. They compared the IQ of children in a village where the well water was less than 0.7, and the other village, the well water was between 2.5 and 4.5 parts per million. And they controlled for lead, they controlled for iodine, and we now know they controlled for arsenic. And they found a 5 to 10 IQ drop across the whole age range. The whole IQ curve was shifted for both males and females. Here's the male. So this is the low fluoride village, and this is the high fluoride village, and that whole curve has been shifted over. Please remember that, because I'm going to come back to what it means to shift a population curve over like that. Now, last 2012, a team from Harvard University, Choi et al., and included a world-famous epidemiologist called Philip Grandjean, did a meta-analysis of 27 of these studies. They put all these studies together and took an average. And the study was published in the leading environmental health journal in the world, Environmental Health Perspectives. The Harvard team acknowledged that there were weaknesses in many of these studies. However, they said the results are remarkably consistent. Of the 27 studies that they looked at, 26 showed a reduction in IQ in the high village versus the low village. And the average of the lowering was 7 IQ points, which is very substantial. Now, opponents, oh, I can use that. I'll probably blind somebody in the front row. Oh, I see. Okay. Now, the proponents of fluoridation say, oh, well, these studies were done at such high concentrations, they're not relevant to water fluoridation. Phooey. Actually, 9 of the studies, the high fluoride village was less than 3 parts per million. And of those 9, 6 were statistically significant. So these studies offer no adequate margin of safety to protect all children drinking uncontrolled amounts of fluoridated water. Now, don't forget, if you're a health agency and you have a policy as stupid as putting a toxic substance deliberately into the drinking water, and I can't think of anything more stupid than looking at that huge distillation plant of taking seawater and distilling it, and then putting it through reverse osmosis, and then turn around and dump a poisonous substance into it. That has to be Monty Python level. If you are a health agency, you have to protect all your people. You can't adopt the attitude, we're going to protect the average person. You've got to make sure that your policy is not going to harm anybody in Curacao. Why should you sacrifice 1 individual, or 12 individuals, or 100 individuals, or 1,000 individuals in order to benefit tooth decay in a large number of people? No, it's not acceptable. And so you need a large margin of safety. I'm going to skip those next 2 points, and I'm going to rush through this because I don't think the time allows me to go into the detail here. But again, if you want to see these calculations, you can have this PowerPoint. I am going to start with these studies here. Whoops. I'm going to start here. These are 5 studies. You see where the IQ was lowered: 1.8, 2, 2.9, 2.5, 2.38. We start with 1.8. We always go for the lowest level that causes harm. And we have to apply a margin of safety calculation to protect everybody. And I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go to the end and tell you that the safe dose sufficient to protect everyone in a large population from lowered IQ is 0.009 milligrams per day. In the United States, if we drink at 1 part per million, that would be 9 milliliters of water. In Curacao, it would be 6 milliliters. A couple of teaspoons of water is all you would allow if you wanted to protect all your kids from lowered IQ. This is astounding. Now, please challenge my arithmetic, challenge my assumptions. I can tell you, I've used the basic assumptions that are used by regulatory agencies when they're determining a safe dose when you've got harm demonstrated in a small population. And I also looked at what this would mean for a baby. And I'll forgo a breastfed baby drinking 800 milliliters at 0.004 milligrams per liter would get 0.0032 milligrams per day. And that, I've calculated, would not lower IQ. It's just about below the level that would lower IQ, according to my calculations. But in Curacao, a bottle-fed baby drinking 800 milliliters of water at 1.5 milligrams per liter would get 1.2 milligrams per day, which is 400 times the safe dose as far as protecting that baby from lowered IQ. 400 times. 40,000% too much if you want to protect the IQ of your babies. Now, let me show you what this means on a population level. If I was to shift, okay, this is a normal distribution. This is any human trait, whether we're talking about height or weight or whatever, would follow this bell-shaped curve. The average person would have the average value. Most people are going to be here at the bulge of the bell here. But there are going to be a few people up here that are going to have very high IQs and a few people down here low IQs. And let me show you that. So these would be, if you like, these are your geniuses in Curacao. Here, the area under this curve are your geniuses in Curacao. And here are the mentally handicapped in Curacao. Now, let me shift the curve over by 5 IQ points. Now, a parent, the average would go from 100 to 95. A parent or a school teacher would not notice the difference between two children. One had an IQ of 100, one of 95. You wouldn't notice it. You'd have to study very carefully, do this IQ test to really tease this out. But look what happens to the tails of the curve. Oops. Oh, I've missed out. I'm sorry. For some reason, I've missed out. Let me tell you. What the result would be here is that you would halve the number of geniuses in your society, or the number of very, very bright people you would halve, and you would double the number of mentally handicapped. So this is why it's so serious to expose a whole population to a neurotoxic substance. You could live a long time not noticing what's happening because you're only looking at the average person. And unless you do careful tests, you would not find out about this or this until it was too late. This is very, very serious. Ugly fact number 7. Fluoridation may actually be killing a few young boys each year. Not many, a few. This is a study but done at Harvard by Elise Bassin in 2006. And what she found, that young boys exposed to fluoridated water in their 6th, 7th, and 8th years, between 6 and 8 years of age, had a 5 to 7-fold increased risk of developing osteosarcoma by the age of 20 compared to non-exposed boys. This was a very, very careful study. It won her a doctorate at Harvard. This is extraordinary. This osteosarcoma is a bone cancer, and it's frequently fatal. Frequently fatal. Now, this 2006 study has never been refuted, although it's trouble when you give me these things. I've got 2 machines to play with, and I click on one and think I'm okay. So her thesis advisor, Chester Douglas, promised that his larger study would refute her thesis. But when it was finally published in 2011, it failed to do so. There was no way that the methodology that they used here would challenge this notion of a window of vulnerability. What she's saying is there's a window of vulnerability here. If you expose young boys with their rapidly developing bones to fluoridated water, whoops, at that age range you increase your risk of succumbing to osteosarcoma, frequently fatal. So there are the 7 ugly facts. Now, better alternatives for fighting tooth decay. The vast majority, first thing to say is the vast majority of countries do not fluoridate their water. 97% of Western Europe does not fluoridate its water. 4 of those countries fluoridate their salt, but the majority of European countries neither fluoridate their water, nor their salt, nor their milk. And yet, according to World Health Organization figures, tooth decay in these non-fluoridated countries, here they are, these non-fluoridated countries, is coming down. This is from the 60s to the more or less the present. The tooth decay is coming down as fast in 12-year-olds in all these countries, regardless of whether they're fluoridated or non-fluoridated. And if you look at the tooth decay rates today, it's a wash. There is no difference. Now, obviously, these are crude figures, but certainly the benefit of fluoridation does not scream at you from those curves. But the more important thing is that those countries have clearly found ways of reducing tooth decay without forcing fluoridation on people. So, as far as alternatives, if you want fluoride, and I haven't used fluoridated toothpaste for 17 years since I've started researching this. But if you want it, then the most sensible thing to do is to brush it on your teeth and spit it out. Now, better still, I would recommend using xylitol toothpaste. Xylitol is a natural sugar. We make it in our own bodies, about 30 grams a day. We get it in natural products like pine bark and strawberries. The beauty of this stuff is it's bad for the bacteria, the Streptococcus mutans, that convert sugar into acid. And it's the acid which attacks the enamel and starts the tooth decay process. If those bacteria absorb this sugar, xylitol, they can't stick to the teeth. They can't stick to the plaque. And that's it. They can't survive in the mouth. So we have a nice way of getting rid of these bacteria without poisoning ourselves. I do have one word of warning. Xylitol is poisonous for some breed of dogs. So I don't recommend fluoridated xylitol chewing gum, because people will throw that and the dogs can eat it. Use fluoridated mints. In fact, they've been doing that in schools in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas. In the schools, in the low-income areas, they're giving the kids one xylitol mint to suck on in the morning and one in the afternoon, and this is proving fairly effective. And also give free toothbrushes and free toothpaste to low-income families. Most of the tooth decay today is present in low-income families because of poor diet, poor inability to afford dental care, and so on. Now, in Scotland, where you've got places like Glasgow with a lot of poverty, they have a program which has been particularly impressive, and I want to read it to you. This is from a BBC report. A scheme to encourage nursery children to brush their teeth has saved more than £6 million in dental costs, according to a new study. Child's Smile, that's what it's called, involves staff at all Scottish nurseries offering free supervised toothbrushing every day. It emphasizes the importance of toothbrushing and helps parents establish a healthy diet from the earliest stage. The program was launched in 2001, costs about £1.8 million a year. Glasgow researchers found that the scheme had reduced the cost of treating dental disease in 5-year-olds by more than half between 2001 and 2010. So again, that is a program that I suggest that the Ministry of Health here in Curacao goes and investigates this. This is where to put your money. Put your money into looking at a program that has worked under difficult circumstances. Now, Tooth decay is concentrated in low-income families. And the most distressing tooth decay is what we call baby bottle tooth decay. This occurs when a baby sucks on a bottle of fruit juice, sugared water, even Coca-Cola, milk. And what happens is that the babies have this suck on this thing for hours on end, even go to sleep with it. And this rots the top teeth down to the gums. And that was the picture that was used by Queensland Health, was an example of baby bottle tooth decay. It's intellectually dishonest for dentists to show these pictures of baby bottle tooth decay as to what's going to happen if you don't fluoridate your water, because fluoridated water does not solve the problem of abuse of the teeth with this sucking on bottles of fruit juice, etc. Now, low-income families need better diet and better dental education. Less sugar, more brushing. Less sugar, more brushing. And less sugar means less tooth decay and less obesity and less diabetes, which is going to cost our healthcare systems around the world billions of dollars. So I argue this: if you switch from fluoridation to education, you get a double win here. You're not only fighting tooth decay, but you are fighting obesity. We need better diet, better. This is something that Rudolph here has been preaching for over 20 years on this island. Health is about diet. You have a lousy diet and you're going to have lousy health. This is where we have to start. This is what our Ministry of Health around the world should be doing. Education for better diets. So, I will summarize 10 arguments. Fluoridation is a bad medical practice. You can't control the dose. You can't control who gets the fluoride. It violates the individual's right to informed consent. 2, fluoride is not a nutrient. 3, fluoride can interfere with many biochemical processes. The level of fluoride in mother's milk is very, very low, 0.004. A bottle-fed baby in Curacao would get 370 times more fluoride than breast milk. Not a sensible thing to do. The evidence of any benefit is weak. I cited 2 studies, Brunel, Carlos, 1990, Warren and others, 2009, and the World Health Organization figures for different countries. The evidence that it does any good is very weak, and the reason for that is that the benefits are predominantly topical, not systemic. 7, today children are getting far too much fluoride. See the dental fluorosis prevalence in the United States and elsewhere. And 8, fluoride can damage the brain, and there are 37 studies that have found a statistically significant reduction in IQ associated with fluoride exposure as low as 1.8 parts per million. Think about it. You're fluoridating at 1.5, and here we have lowered IQ at 1.8. That is insane. Fluoride accumulates in the bone and may cause osteosarcoma in young men. Over a lifetime, it may cause arthritic-like symptoms, pains in the joints, stiffness in the joints, and increased hip fractures. Very serious in the elderly. And 10, there are better alternatives that are proving successful in many non-fluoridated countries like Scotland. In short, the risks to the brain and the bones far outweigh the small benefit to the teeth. Lower tooth decay can be achieved in low-income families with alternative methods which do not involve exposing the whole body to fluoride and do not involve governments forcing on citizens who don't want it. We need fluoridation, education, not fluoridation, to fight tooth decay and obesity. We need to get dentistry out of the public water supply and back into the dental office or the dental clinic where it belongs. It is time to end fluoridation in Curacao. Okay. I have just a little bit more, just a wee bit more. But thank you anyway. So I just wanted to show you that we have had some remarkable successes over the last few years. Since 2008, over 130 communities in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States have stopped fluoridation. Over 4 million people have been liberated from this wretched practice. On May the 21st last year, Portland, Oregon voted 61% to 39% to reject fluoridation despite being outspent 3-1. And listen to this, the proponents of this measure spent over $1 million to get Portland fluoridated. They even gave several community groups $20,000 just to get them to say, we want fluoridation. Could you imagine that these local groups, they weren't asked to do anything. Not even canvas. Just put your name on this bit of paper. Here's a check for $20,000. This is disgusting. But money buys anything in the United States. In November 2012, no, I'm sure not. In 2012, Queensland lifted mandatory requirement. You wouldn't believe what happened. It was like opening the floodgates. We've now had nearly 50 communities have stopped fluoridation since they stopped the mandatory requirement. And then last year in April, the new Minister of Health in Israel announced the lifting of the mandatory requirement for fluoridation in Israel. That was a very, very significant event. And hopefully Ireland will follow soon. Ireland also has mandatory fluoridation. And as far as resources are concerned, please use our website, fluoridealert.org. It's a goldmine of accurate information, and it's not all propaganda as they try to maintain. It's not. This book, this review is available free online, the National Research Council review. If you put in National Research Council 2006 and fluoride, you'll get this document online. Our book is available, and it is the Bible. I mean, for us it's the Bible, but it lays out the arguments very, very clearly. And we've also got a 29-minute DVD called Professional Perspectives on Fluoridation, where 15 scientists from around the world, including Nobel Prize winners and members of the US EPA and members of that National Research Council review team, explain why, in simple language, why fluoridation is a bad idea. And my son has also made recently this 20-minute DVD called 10 Facts on Fluoride, plus a booklet. So you can make copies of this, you can download it from the internet. It's only 20 minutes long, and you've got a booklet to go with it. It's a great educational tool. But from what I've seen, I think you've got some really good educational tools already on this island. So I don't think you're going to be short of education. And that's it. Now you can stand up and applaud. Yeah, please sit down now, but I think it would be very useful for the TV cameras. Please put up your hand if you want to see fluoridation stopped in Curacao. Can the cameras just look at those hands, please? Just look at it. Okay. And put up your hand if you want to see fluoridation continue in Curacao. I think some people are sensibly sitting on the fence at this point.